And one of them, as we did the introduction, said to me, so who are SAS? And I thought, I haven't been to one of these events before, so just indulge me for 1 minute, because you can see I'm a sales director, but I'm not going to sell to you tonight. SAS is actually one of the largest private companies in the world, which is probably why you don't know very much about us. In the analytics field, we have 35% of the global markets. We have 60,000 customers, and we put back 24% of our profits into R&D. There is not a risk problem in the world, in financial services, that we haven't solved, that you are grappling with a customer somewhere. That's what SAS do in financial services for risk. I am not a technologist, and I have very few slides tonight. And the reason I did this slide with my qualifications on there, which I tend not to publish regularly, is I think I'm amongst friends because I am a banker by profession. I happen to work for a technology company. I worked for banks for 27 years, and I have done 4 jobs at C-level, including being Chief Risk Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and Head of Transformational Change. I've worked in retail, wealth, and corporate, and I have had the misfortune, as I'm sure many of you have in this room, but you will not admit to it, of dealing with what are euphemistically known as remedial projects, or perhaps projects that have come from a Section 166 or a Section 39 from the regulator, which we all know and love. Nobody ever admits to the fact that they're working on one and has got one, but we know that there are more now in the market than there have probably been because of the climate that we currently work in. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of who's got one at the moment. I mean, we know that they are plenty. The most important thing is actually, if you think about it, is they're the projects that get the money. And unfortunately, they may feel very painful because you're under a spotlight. People lose their jobs, people can lose their reputation, people can have their assets seized. There is a real personal liability attached to the role and control function these days, and any board member of a bank. The other reason I put my qualifications up there is something that Terry Wogan and I have in common, is we both have more qualifications than what was all of the boards of RBS and HBOS before they failed, effectively. So really, that's not a good thing to boast about, but at the end of the day, I am an operational banker and not a technologist. So what I wanted to share with you is I wanted to talk to you about risk, reality and real time. Because having spent 8 years now working for technology companies, I want to share with you the lessons that I have learned along the way and the sort of problems that we're dealing with. And I only wish I knew, when I worked in a bank at C-level, what I knew now about technology companies and how the market works and how they're not just there to sell to you, they can actually be your friend, believe it or not. Now what technology companies have is a great understanding of their products and their product roadmaps and how they can help you. Now you internally, when you have a problem, whether it's a remedial program or something that needs some sort of investment in terms of technology, you will go to your internal IT department and you will probably talk to people who have worked for your organisation for a number of years. They, however capable they are, they cannot, because things are moving so quickly, be aware of all of the developments, with all the technology companies that are happening all of the time. So how on earth do we get best advice? That is the biggest challenge. And one of the things I would say to you is leverage your existing suppliers and ask them for basically free advice. The first port of call shouldn't necessarily be writing out very large checks to consultancy firms. Just go and do your due diligence. Anybody from a technology company will have a conversation with you over a cup of coffee and give you free advice, and you can take it or leave it. What I wanted to say is I'm older than I look, I hope. And back in the day, I got involved in strategic change in risk. The first program was I worked for a bank which had its first loss in 300 years. And this was a catastrophic event. And this loss had arisen, not because it had lent money to the wrong type of companies, but that it had lent money at the wrong price, and that its portfolio was concentrated in a particular segment, which was at that time property. Now, what that bank didn't have, because it only did returns on a monthly basis, was an understanding of what they were lending to whom, the data around portfolio management and the price that they were lending at, and also an analysis, a quantitative and qualitative analysis of when they made a lending decision, how they arose to that decision and what the peer group looked like of the counterparty they were lending to. All these things should be pretty routine today. I mean, this was in a world when you did a credit report and it was written by hand or dictated by a bank manager. You didn't even actually have a keyboard or a PC, and everything went in the post. Now, you may think she's really old, but actually, it wasn't that long ago. And I can remember working on this project, sitting in the office late one night, and we were sort of working 24/7, one of us, and there was one very young guy who was always in the office late. And one night I said to him, "You're still late. What are you working on?" And he said, "Actually, it's something personal that I'm interested in, but I can't do it from home because I can't get the connection." And he sat down and he put me in front of this screen, and we went through a very laborious method. And he said, "You're logging on now. Congratulations, this is the World Wide Web." Now, that was only in the early 90s. Now, I would like to confess to you that I went home that night on the train, and I had a lightning vision of what the World Wide Web was going to do for banking in the 21st century. I'd like to confess that, but it would be a lie. I'd like to say to you, I had a dream. I had a dream that within 15 to 20 years, I would be standing up with an iPhone, with the computing power to be able to do any type of banking transaction and use data and get information at my fingertips in near real time. Now, the people that understood the innovation of what the World Wide Web could do were always younger, innovative people. And the whole thing wasn't necessarily driven by aging middle-aged bankers, but it was driven by companies like Facebook and Google, and the banks have always had to play catch-up. Now, what that brings with it is a completely different paradigm about how we are perceived by people who we deal with through that channel. And much more is known about us out there in the World Wide Web, and the analytics that happen about us personally to prompt companies to sell to you is phenomenal. Now, the data challenges that are in all companies now, just not banks. But the banks are having to play, they're not at the forefront of this. Now, one of the things that we are seeing in the marketplace is that we know that when the regulators find you wanting and that you are perceived to be falling short, that it is often in the area of how you manage your data. And but we don't sell databases. But we do things around data quality and data integration. So we can help you manage your data, and we have worked with customers who have been in similar positions where they have needed to do things in very short time scales. And I suppose what I'm saying to you is that if I went back, if I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, into a banking environment, I would be asking my internal IT departments, as a CRO and a COO, a seriously different set of questions than I did in the world when I used to do those roles. Simply because I have seen life from the other side. And one of the things that is the mission that gets me out of bed is I want to be able to educate bankers, not necessarily technologists in banking, but people who work on the business side in banking, to be able to ask the appropriate probing questions of your internal IT departments so they can come up with the best solutions for you, whether that's SAS or another provider. It doesn't really matter. But the problem is that the development of technology is moving so quickly. I mean, it's moving absolutely exponentially that actually no one person can have a vision and understanding of everything that is available to you at any one time. And the big question is, when you have to make investment decisions, when is the right time to do that? And are you being forced to actually make tactical decisions instead of spending that same amount of money for something that could be strategic? And very quickly, I'd like to give you a story. Something happened post the 2008 crisis in this regional jurisdiction about regulation, which affects all of us actually. It was the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, where banks, which is considered a regulatory project, where banks had to put in a system for being able to report to the financial compensation scheme that part of the Living Will programme, that if they failed, that they would be able to provide a report that said an individual was entitled up to £85,000 payout under the government's compensation scheme. Now, it sounds simple, but actually, if you think about your personal circumstances and who you bank with, and because the banks have merged and several legal entities, you may have many accounts, either in your own right or with another, jointly with your partner, with your children, that collectively may be Mrs. A. Jones, Mrs. Angela Jones, Mrs. Angela J. Jones, and how do they know that all of those Mrs. Joneses are the same person? This is the struggle. And it was actually a data quality issue of being able to reconcile that information very quickly to be able to send a report when the bank was failing. Now, in a previous life, I took a phone call quite late on a Friday evening from a gentleman who had been into a bank in Newcastle, and it was 3 days after that bank failed. And he shall remain nameless, but he was very senior at the Bank of England. And I had met him previously, and he rang me and he said, "We have a real problem here. This bank is going to fail. We do not know how to get data, the customer data, out of the bank when it fails to be able to pay customers under a compensation scheme. Can you help?" And they had every single consultant under the sun crawling over the infrastructure and trying to come up with an answer. Now, the story that I would like to extend to you is every bank was faced with coming up with a solution to what is known as single customer view to solve the regulatory issue, and it was time-bound how they had to do it. Now, interestingly, the ones who had the biggest problems came up with the least technical solutions. Now, if you're in sales and marketing, in any capacity in a bank, your nirvana for many years has been you have wanted to be able to have a single customer view of your customers, to be able to understand, what is my relation with the credit card division, what is my relationship with the mortgage division, what is my relationship with the corporate division, the retail bank, the wealth management, etc. Because they had grown up, most of them through mergers, with separate systems that didn't speak to each other. So there was only one bank in the whole of the UK that took that regulatory project and said, this is not a risk project. This project is a sales and marketing project, for which we will use risk budget. We will solve the risk problem, but we will use risk as an investment to put in a platform for a master data management piece of technology that will give us a single customer view, and the risk project will solve the nirvana issue that we've been trying to achieve for the last 10 years. Now, the reason the banker were able to do that, the difference was, and the only difference, was that they had a leaner decision-making process within that bank. Where the other banks went, this is a risk project, and it was absolutely governed only by risk, who didn't speak to other areas of the business. So my lesson from that was, and my question to all of you is, you will see that I haven't done too many PowerPoints, but this should be a familiar diagram which you have on your table. This is called the technology adoption life cycle. And do you remember the gentleman that I talked to you about who showed me how to sign on to the World Wide Web? Well, he was, he was over here. He was one of the techies who was trying it. He was an innovator. Okay, that's the sort of category he fell in. And if I had a few props here, I will show you that, here's my shiny new iPad, the latest version. Here's my shiny new iPhone. Haven't got the 5 yet, but I've got 4S. Am I an early adopter? No, I think I am probably an early majority. And I suppose the question that I want to ask you is, firstly, in your personal lives, not in your professional lives, but in your personal lives, and you don't have to share this with other people on the table yet unless you want to, where would you put yourselves in terms of adopting technology? It's a very personal question, right? There's no right or wrong answer. It doesn't matter. Marketeers use this sort of data to figure out who to market to, etc. And then the next question that I would like you to consider is, where do you think your company is? Now, the bigger question is, there are lots of people here in all sorts of different roles in large financial institutions. So think about it from your area of that financial institution, not necessarily the whole group. Do you work in an area that when faced, because we all have the challenges every day of strategic change, whether they're remedial programs or not. When you come up with a solution as a business, are you following the herd from a technology perspective? Or are you looking to be the leader of the pack and innovate and try something new? Okay. So they're the two questions that I would like to leave you with. And the reason we put the diagram on the table is you might actually, if you have a pen that you can share, is actually plot. Where are you personally? Where is your organisation? And I would expect, there's no right or wrong answer here. Depending on the type of organisation and the type of business, you would expect to see different answers. There is no right answer. Okay? I have 5 minutes? Good.
Thank you.